morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday Jonas Cuaron, son of Alfonso Cuaron, chose his Zorro, and that is Gael Garcia Bernal. And I think that was an absolutely horrible choice, which is not only going to sink the movie, but really hurt Jonas Cuaron as he tries to make an impression with mainstream Hollywood and mainstream moviegoers. But what's really interesting about this is that it provides a unique situation, or opportunity, I guess is the right word, to truly understand why Hollywood sometimes makes such horrible decisions. But first, let me give you a quick refresher on this Zorro movie. So they're doing another Zorro, right? Now, Antonio Banderas certainly left his mark on the character when he did not just one, but two Zorro films. But now, Latino audiences are really flexing considerable muscle at the box office. So I think, very cleverly, Hollywood, or at least some producers, have decided that it's time to have yet the character return to the big screen and to provide a Latino, vigilante superhero to some degree. I mean, don't forget that Zorro inspired Batman, right? So why not kind of like have the reverse situation where it's like, hey, if you like Batman, maybe you like Zorro. Now you might be like, but doesn't he live in a hacienda like in the 1800s? No, not in this Zorro. This Zorro will take place in an apocalyptic future and have like some tech. It'll be kind of like, I guess, like more Dredd-like, but right? But with the Latino Dredd. So that sounds like a pretty good pitch, actually, when you think about it. But then you stick Gael Garcia Bernal smack in the middle of it. And I think that's a big mistake. Now, Jonas Cuaron, he's directed movies before, I think just like two, but he really got on to the scene with Gravity, which he co-wrote with his father, Alfonso, who obviously is a huge talent. And Alfonso Cuaron won the Oscar for directing for Gravity. So that was a good father-son project. But anyway, now Jonas has graduated to like a big picture, right? And I think that Gael Garcia Bernal is not a great choice because, for two reasons. Three reasons. The first, he had his chance. He tried to transition into mainstream Hollywood like a couple of years ago. That's how I think most people, if they don't know his name, at least recognize his face. And it didn't take, right? American audiences, and I think to a larger degree global audiences. I mean, he's never been a movie star. I mean, beyond, I think, like the Spanish language market. Although I'd be curious, for those of you in the Spanish language market, is Gael Garcia Bernal a big name, right? I think he's more of a critically acclaimed name. So he's not really someone who drives box office, and he's been rejected by moviegoers already. Next, he seems kind of small to me. He doesn't really, so is Karl Urban, to some degree, but Karl Urban was really great as Dredd. But he was helped out by that mask all the time and like the armor. But Gael Garcia Bernal doesn't really seem like a swashbuckling hero to me, even in the future, So I just don't buy him in that capacity. And then the other thing is, the third reason is that he's extremely political. He's extremely political. And I think it's really tough to be politically active when you're trying to appeal to a mass audience, right? I mean, just ask George Clooney, right? And also, to some degree, Matt Damon. Although I think Matt Damon, has, emerged from that relatively unscathed. But anyway, so I think that's a problem for Gael Garcia Bernal. Maybe he could have a supporting role in the new Zorro, but to make him Zorro, I feel, is a mistake. Now, why would they pick him? Well, the Cuarons have a long relationship with Gael Garcia Bernal. He was one of the stars of Y Tu Mama Tambien, which was Alfonso Cuaron's first big movie, right? Well, at least, with the, beyond the Spanish language market. Also, and they've worked together a lot. Also, he was in Jonas Cuaron's first, real feature film, Desierto, a couple of years ago with Jeffrey Dean Morgan. So, obviously, the Cuarons have a wonderful relationship with Gael Garcia Bernal, and they're buddies, and they're like, hey, Jonas has, gotten the call to move on up. He's going to make a Spanish language hero. How can we not? Or, a Latino vigilante, how can we not give it to Gael, our buddy? Wouldn't that kind of make us jerks? We all came up together. Now, when I get the call, I'll pass my good luck on to you. And I would say, as I said, you know what? Give him a supporting role. But I just don't think that he's a good lead. I think they've just torpedoed the whole project. And, friends don't let friends star in a bomb, quite frankly. Now, I was trying to think who would be a good Zorro, right? And also, I was very happy that Robert Rodriguez hadn't gotten a hold of the property. Robert Rodriguez, it's such a shame. He was so good for a while, really talented, but I think, he's just really gone off the deep end in terms of, the quality of the work that he delivers. And I also think there's some question as to the taste factor that he has as well. But it occurred to me, Oscar Isaac. Oscar Isaac would be absolutely fantastic as the new Zorro. He's quite dashing. Just ask anyone who saw Star Wars The Force Awakens. I know he is involved in that property, but Poe Dameron, they haven't done a lot with the character. It doesn't seem like they're going to do too much with the character. And, Harrison Ford was both Han Solo and Indiana Jones, so I see no reason Oscar Isaac couldn't also be this futuristic Zorro. He's quite dashing again. That's worth mentioning twice. I think both men and women like him. And I think that I just saw X-Men Apocalypse, and I was really impressed with his performance. So I would have picked Oscar Isaac for sure. I don't know if he would have been interested in it, but come on, it's the Cuarons. Even though Alfonso so far I don't think is technically involved in it, he's still going to be somewhat involved because it's his son, and I think that Oscar maybe would have taken it. But that would have been a much more exciting project, and I think by casting Gael Garcia Bernal, this just became like, like the Book of Eli, which did okay. That's that movie with Denzel Washington, but still, I don't think it's going to be like the huge blockbuster tentpole movie that perhaps they had imagined. But Oscar Isaac, you can use the fact that he's in Star Wars. It just seems so obvious to me. All right, so anyway, that's the first story of the day. And I'm curious, what do you think of that, Hollywood being a business of relationships mentality? Do you think Gael Garcia Bernal will make a great Zorro? Do you just not care about the Zorro movie, like no matter who they cast as Zorro? And do you think Oscar Isaac would have been a good choice? All right, so the second story of the day is that Krypton is a go, apparently, at Sci-Fi, or at least the pilot episode is. And hopefully it'll leak so we can all at least see it if it doesn't get picked up. But it probably will get picked up because Gotham does pretty darn well on Fox, especially with its second season. Now, it's not like a huge hit or anything, but I think it's a solid enough performer. And I think the Sci-Fi, I think that their standards are a little bit lower as a cable network, so I think this should do pretty well, or at least has a good shot at it. Like, you can totally see why they would greenlight it. So what Krypton is it's going to take place on Krypton, obviously, but it's going to focus on Superman's grandfather, Jor-El's father. And, something about how he has to save the family name and the planet, and I'm like, you've been worried about Krypton exploding for like 2 generations? I thought Jor-El was the one who discovered this, so I was a little confused as to that. And then so this is like David Goyer's brainchild, and then also the showrunner on Sleepy Hollow is going to run the show for Sci-Fi, right? And Sleepy Hollow, also a Fox show, I think that has its fandom, but also not huge. It's like more of like a solid hit, right? But anyway, I don't understand, with Gotham, it's been a little bit easier because, you have like the younger version of all the characters that everybody knows so well. You can have a really good time with all the villains, and often that's what people like most about the Batman property. And also, I think they've done a really interesting job with Jim Gordon, Harvey Dent, those characters, Bullock. I think that I like Gotham quite a bit. However, there's very little known about Krypton, right? There's no character that you're going to be like, oh, I hope they show up. You're just like, it's going to be hard for fans to have those moments where they're like, oh, I know what you're doing. Like the Hugo Strange stuff has been really interesting on Gotham as of late. But I think it's very little that, that you're going to be able to hook and excite fans about with the Krypton show because there's so little that's been written about Krypton, I think, which is both a blessing and a curse for this show. I would also like to point out that the Krypton Supergirl storylines are just absolutely horrible. So when the idea of a whole show of that, I'm like, why would anyone do that? I want less Krypton. I don't want it to have its own show. But maybe it could be good, maybe it could be good. And one of the things I thought could be interesting was the version of Brainiac that they used in the animated series. As you might recall, that was a supercomputer on Krypton. So you could have Brainiac be a major character there in the Krypton show. And that could be cool, because everyone's really wanted to see Brainiac. And maybe this is a way to get Brainiac, because I don't think he's coming to the DCEU anytime soon, because there's no Superman 2 slated. And, they've got a lot of other stuff to do. They're doing Darkseid instead. So you could put Brainiac here, and I think that might be pretty interesting to a lot of people. So I just don't know. I would definitely watch it because I'm just curious to see what they do. But I'm really curious to see how they could, I'm also curious to see how they could possibly pull it off. Do you see potential for a Krypton show? If you were an executive at Sci-Fi, would you be like, they obviously have seen a better treatment or the full treatment from David Goyer, and he's outlined what he plans to do, but I'd be nervous about it. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Now, the third story of the day is that Doug Liman has a little pet project that he's going to do before he does Gambit, and that's this movie, The Wall, for Amazon. It's a really small, movie. It takes place just at like a piece of concrete in Iraq where an American sniper is trying to, take on an Iraqi sharpshooter, and he's pinned down, the American sniper, behind just this little wall of concrete. So it's like a, like a mental thriller, right? So it was written by Dwayne Worrell, who's got the script on the Blacklist. He was, we talked about this. He was overseas in Asia. We talked about Doug Liman getting this gig, and Dwayne Worrell doing a wonderful job breaking into Hollywood. So it's a good story. But the reason we're talking about it today is that this little Amazon movie looks like it's found its star, right? And it's going to be Aaron Taylor Johnson. And I think that's great. I think this is a very good opportunity for Aaron Taylor Johnson to prove that he is not as bad as he was in Godzilla, right? I mean, I think Godzilla did a lot of damage to him, his image, because everyone was like, that guy, I couldn't stand him. I think everyone was so upset that they weren't with Bryan Cranston during Godzilla. And then also I think that the Godzilla script really didn't give Aaron Taylor Johnson anything to do. He just was kind of like, just very vanilla, very milquetoast. So I think that was not good for him. So I'm glad that he got this. And the reason I feel like he could do a good job is that I loved his Quicksilver so much. I thought he was really good as Quicksilver. Quicksilver is obviously a fantastic role that, is open to many wonderful and fantastic interpretations. Again, having seen X-Men Apocalypse. But he was also pretty good in Kick-Ass, although there he was outshined by Hit Girl, obviously, Chloe Grace Moretz. So I'm hoping that with this movie, maybe he can start to finally carve out his own little niche and make an impression with movie fans, or at least do a really good performance that it maybe gets him another bigger role in a bigger movie. And so, it could at the very least be a calling card for Aaron Taylor Johnson. I think right now he's best known as the husband of Sam Taylor Johnson, who discovered him with Nowhere Boy. I think that's the John Lennon Beatles movie that she made, and she's also made 50 Shades of Grey. So that's what he's most known for, I think, tabloid-wise these days, and it would be nice for him to be able to, again, have this nice little calling card to send out to directors and producers. All right, so those are the three stories of the day, and we're going to switch back a little bit to TV for a question from Vladimir Nedolojkovic from Serbia. So hello, Vladimir. I'm sorry I did such a horrible job pronouncing your last name, but I can get Vladimir. So Vladimir wrote me a very long question, so I'm going to paraphrase. Apologies, Vladimir. But, he said very nicely that he and his friends watch BTT, and so that meant a lot. And he had a very interesting question that I've seen a number of you actually asking me about, so that's why I picked Vlad's question. So he basically said, I don't understand why there's a lack of continuity all of a sudden between the Marvel movies and what's happening specifically in, like, not just the TV shows, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He said, he said in Civil War, the Sokovia Accords were about the Avengers and the fact that they're superpowered individuals running around unsupervised. But in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Inhumans were introduced on a global scale, no less, since the Terrigen crystals have spread worldwide, and a part of the past season has been about the team running around, rounding up Inhumans. So the question is, how can they ignore that fact? Why aren't Inhumans, talked about in the Accords, etc.? So, and just basically I've seen people talk, also with the Kree. Someone was like, well, when I talked about Carol Danvers and Captain Marvel, and my theory that she could be powered by one of the Infinity Stones, someone was like, as I said, who cares about the Kree? All we've had is Ronan the Accuser. And a couple of you said, oh, well, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has actually done quite a bit to establish the Kree. Well, here's the situation that I think you should be very aware of. Kevin Feige does not get along with Isaac Perlmutter, who owns Marvel, and basically oversees the comics and the television shows via Jeff Loeb, right? And also Joe Quesada is the head of the comic book division, right? But they both report to Isaac Perlmutter. Kevin Feige, though, is obviously extremely powerful and didn't want to report to Isaac Perlmutter. And since he's so successful and has delivered so strongly in his division, he was able to successfully lobby Disney to separate him from the comics and television Marvel divisions. So now, while Joe Quesada and Jeff Loeb still report to Isaac Perlmutter, who then reports to Alan Horn, well, I don't know how much I would say reports to, into Disney, because Isaac Perlmutter now is like something of a Disney shareholder because they purchased Marvel. So it's a different relationship. But anyway, now Kevin Feige, he reports directly to Alan Horn, who heads up their movie division. Bob Iger heads up all of Disney. So there's a different chain of command now. And Kevin Feige separated himself from Isaac Perlmutter because he doesn't want to be beholden to what's going on in the TV shows. He doesn't want someone else creatively being able to mess with what he's very carefully constructed. So I think you're going to see a distancing. I've said before, maybe not from the Marvel Netflix shows because they're so popular, but especially what's going on the network. TV shows. I think you're going to see a separation. That's why the Inhumans movie has been pushed again. I think that's just going to die. I think that Kevin Feige, very politically savvy, and a very politically savvy move, is just never going to make that movie. Something will always come up to push it back. It'll never happen. And I'd like to point out the Bleeding Cool reported that, and for that reason, it was for this reason that Kevin Feige doesn't want to make an Inhumans movie, and it was thrust upon him by Isaac Perlmutter, because Isaac Perlmutter was busy establishing all of this over on his TV show. So Feige doesn't want to play that game. He's taking on enough onto his own plate with like Spider-Man, etc. So he freed himself from that. So that's why there's no continuity there. So I think that even though technically they still exist in the same cinematic universe, as far as we should be concerned, they do not. Kevin Feige certainly does not pay attention to what's happening on Marvel TV anymore. I don't think he pays attention to what's happening anywhere, quite frankly, what anyone's doing in any division at this point, because, he's just so successful. He's really the driving force behind everything now at Marvel. People watch the TV shows and read the comics, I think, because of the success of the movies these days. So I can understand why Feige did it, but let's see. I think if he stays quiet and doesn't ever bring it up, there'll probably never be any backlash from the fans. And also, the viewership on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is, respectable, and I'm glad some of you are really enjoying it, but it's certainly not like a legion of fans who are going to be upset that it's not being honored. So that Vlad, is the answer to your question. I hope that cleared things up for you. Hi to you and all your friends. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Please write down below, I think, today's top 3 stories and that viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.